Today, we're confronted with what it means to come face to face with God. The showbread, the communion, the face of God, facing at a meal with God face to face. In Exodus, God sent that seismic sound and light show that shocked and awed the people of Israel. But he left behind the plans to build a portable doorway to heaven. That's what the tabernacle was. It was a portable, set up doorway to heaven. And people could see through that doorway to the very throne of God. And he set those plans in the hands of Moses, and that humans, if they followed his prescribed words, could come face to face with God, but always through a substitutionary sacrifice, a substitute that took the offerer's place. That was the only way of approaching God. Coming before God is an awesome thought. In fact, Paul, remember in Titus 2 when we went through that, the first word describing a godly older woman, do you remember that word? Heteropropes. Heteron means temple. Propes is a representative. A godly older woman was to be like a woman that was representing the gods. And in the ancient culture, it was the woman that met you at the gate of the temple of Zeus or the temple of whoever you were going to worship in the pantheon of Greco-Roman world. And that woman would meet you at the door and say, "No, this is a sacred way." Usually the temple was a mile away. In fact, if you go to Ephesus, get off the cruise boat, go to Ephesus, and the temple, the great temple of Artemis at Ephesus is a mile outside of town. They didn't put their temples in the middle of towns. Towns built around them. They were outside of town because the gods were to be revered. And she'd say, "Oh, you can't come in until you take a bath and put on a special robe and quietly follow me." And Paul said that's what godly older women are to be, a walking through life representative that takes people to God. Boy, what a high calling. I mean, Paul laid it on those ladies back then. But the idea of reverential awe is what's always connected with worship of whether it's foreign, fake, dead gods or the true and living God. And so God sent this structure so people through the tabernacle could be face to face with God. But think about it for a moment. And I'm going to let you use your thinking for a moment, your imagination there, because God gave us pictures. Here's an 81 square mile camp of tents and a gigantic tent in the middle that had a flame of fire, a pillar of fire over it all the time, representing the presence of God. And God put that glowing, eternal representation of his glory right in the center of camp. And for 40 years, they were on a camp out. Do you remember why? God says, every one of you are going to die and be buried in the campground. Not one of you is going to get to the promised land because you didn't honor me. And so as their lives were getting old and faded and they were wearing down and getting closer and closer to their turn to being buried, they were looking at this changeless representation, this glowing pillar of fire, and during the daytime, a cloudy covering that kept them from the blazing 125-degree Sinai sun. And they saw a changeless God as they faded away. Why did God put that right in the middle of the camp? Because only what is attached to God will last forever. And God said, you guys are dying. Your carcasses, that's how Hebrews calls it, your carcasses will fall in the desert, and you will be buried. And for 40 years, they went to a collection of campgrounds, and at every campground, they buried more people because not one of them would go in the promised land because of their unbelief. But as they were dying off, God said, only what's attached to me. If you attach yourself to me, you will last forever. And I'm right in the middle of your camp, and I have this big, changeless, glowing tent. Attach your life to me. See how gracious God is? He was gracious, always has been. The Lord God, merciful and gracious, long-suffering. That's God. But you know, anything that's not attached to God needs to be detached from our lives. See, that's why the tabernacle of God is Jesus Christ, and his temple we have become. We are supposed to constantly be thinking, I want everything that I have a choice about in life to be attached to God. We want the balance sheet of our life to reflect the Lord.